Hi, everyone, and
Hi.
thank you, Uri. We're going to talk a little bit about GitMCP, MCP-ui, and our journey, and what do we think the future of MCP and the web is. So first of all, I'm Liad. I'm an engineer in Shopify, and I work on AI and MCP infrastructure. And Ido?
Hi, I'm Ido. I'm a cloud architect in Palo Alto Networks in my day job, and night job working a lot on MCP.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about what is MCP, because I'm sure that if you're here, then you know what MCP is. But we are going to talk a little bit about GitMCP. So GitMCP, it was a side project that we built about 2 months ago or a few months ago, and it really exploded. It's really exploded. It got a lot of traction, a lot of attention, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, and then we'll see how using GitMCP, we were able to work on the new MCP-ui project. So GitMCP, just in a nutshell, it's a free and open source MCP server for every GitHub repo documentation, and it's a remote server. So we'll talk about it in a second. Yeah. So in GitMCP, the general idea is that you take every GitHub repo and you just change from GitHub to GitMCP, and we'll see it in action. And you get an instant remote MCP server for that. And it all started with a tweet of Levels.io like a few months ago. He was like the first one who created the term of game vibe coding, and he tried to vibe code this Three.js game. And it looked really cool, but it didn't look amazing. So the creator of Three.js actually tweeted that he wants some way for LLMs to access his documentation, but the documentation is almost 4 megabytes, so it can't fit in one context window. So I tweeted, okay, this sounds like a job for an MCP server, and Ido wrote to me, yeah, it's a strange way to send me a private message. So we worked together and try to build in like few nights as a side project. We tried to build this remote MCP server for documentation, and it didn't really work, but I sent him the message, hey, tomorrow is April 1st, so whether it works or not, we can publish it. And we did publish it after 3 nights of work, and it really exploded. Like, it got a lot of attention. We put it on Hacker News, we put it on Twitter, and in 24 hours, we got a lot of users that wanted to connect their GitHub repo want to connect their LLMs or agents to libraries documentations. And the problem is that our compute, because we did it as a side project, our compute was on the free tier, and really quickly it went up to the paid tier, and then it hit the limit because we built it as an SSE server. It hit the limit of what the compute back then, it was Vercel functions, could offer us. So at some point, we got to a point that every hour would have cost us $100 just to keep maintaining this project. And it really took like, I don't know, a few minutes. And yeah, and we hit this kind of thing. So we really hit the limit, and we tried to think what to do, because we didn't expect this kind of traction and attention. And out of nowhere, we were working like into the night to solve it. And out of nowhere, we got a message from Cloudflare, like Cloudflare CTO, saying, hey, if you move to Cloudflare, we'll sponsor the entire open source project, which was really cool of them. So we did it, and we did like this blitz of moving to their infrastructure. And over the weekend, we just migrated GitMCP to Cloudflare, which was really cool. And I have to say, I'm not trying to advertise anything, but Cloudflare infra is really great for remote MCP servers. And I think that's a takeaway that I'm trying to give here, that if you want to start and try to experiment with remote MCP servers, Cloudflare has a really good starter for it. And GitMCP, the story itself exploded, and we got a lot of libraries that recommend GitMCP as the way to access their documentation. We got featured in the front page of Geek Time in Israel, and the creator of LLMs.txt actually recommended GitMCP as the way to access LLMs.txt and documentation. So that was really cool. We were a few weeks ago, we were the 8th most used MCP server out of 4,000, which is actually really nice. And we got a lot of good reviews. And before I show the results of GitMCP, let me first show. Before I show the results, I'll first show what GitMCP is. So this is the homepage of GitMCP. You just take any GitHub repo and you can turn it into a GitMCP server. And for example, if I take this repo of Remix and I just change here to even gitmcp.io, then I just get this MCP server. So this is actually the URL of the MCP server, which is pretty cool because you see that if you access it through a browser, you get this web or HTML interface. And if I take this URL and I'll use it as an MCP server, then it will act as an MCP server, right? So if I put it in Cursor, for example, this will be the MCP server. So if you're interested in how to do that, how to do this split between if you access it through a browser or if you access it through MCP server, you really you can take a look. Everything is open source, so you can take a look in our server, which has some pretty cool features. And if you go back to GitMCP, so we added this cool feature of a chat that allows you to actually chat in the browser with the server. So if you click on it, you just get into this chat. And as you can see, we'll have the MCP server already wired into the chat, which is pretty nice. And you can just chat with the documentation. And the nice thing is that because it's URL based, so I can just do it like Microsoft Playwright MCP, and this will allow me to chat with Playwright MCP docs, which is really nice. So back to the presentation, we can see that the same prompt without GitMCP sends the agent to search in the web. Like if I ask something about Cloud Taskmaster and the cursor doesn't know about Cloud Taskmaster, so it searches the web and eventually doesn't give an answer. But if I wire in the GitMCP of a Taskmaster, then you can see it returns an answer almost immediately. It can search the docs. And actually, the cool thing is that we used it for Three.js because that was the original reason we created GitMCP. And you can see the same prompt with the same agent without GitMCP and with GitMCP. You can see the difference just because Cursor had access to the latest documentation of Three.js. Context is really important, as we know. If you try to especially in coding, if you try to ask Cursor to do something and it doesn't have the correct context, then it will create something that you don't want it to create. Client actually recommended GitMCP as the way to access client documentation, which was really, really cool. And we added the chat like I showed before, and I think it's really nice. You can just take a look at the GitMCP repo. It's a really nice repo to learn about how you can not just create an MCP server, but also create everything around it, all the tooling, the HTML, like the web interface and chat that is connected to the server. So just take a look. And it works out of the box with Claude because we're supporting SSE and HTTP streaming, and that's also nice. So if I go here to Claude, and we can see, the added integrations, like custom integrations, I connected here the GitMCP server, and if I go and ask it, let's say, how do I add a route, then you can see here, and it depends really on the speed of Claude, but you can see that it hits the MCP server, right? So it fetches the documentation, and eventually it will process it, and then it can also search for specific things in the documentation, because GitMCP is not just about fetching the documentation; it's about semantic search. So we know to aggregate all of these resources, not just LLMs.txt in README, but also docs folders and docs websites and all this, and we allow search, and you can see that after the search, it can really answer my question. So that's really cool. And OpenAI recently chose GitMCP as the official MCP example because OpenAI added the connection to remote MCPs. So if you go into OpenAI docs, you can see that GitMCP is the example that they chose, which is also pretty cool. And I think that shows the power of open source project, like side projects that you start building because you have some sort of need or you want to solve something, and you immediately hit like this product market fit of open source where everybody has this need. And also it shows that it doesn't matter if you're vibe coding from scratch or you're doing AI-assisted coding, you really need to provide correct context to MCPs. So this is the side of the context, but Ido is going to talk about the other side of things, the user side, and Ido, take it away.
Thanks, Liad. Awesome. So, as I had said, with all the work we've done on GitMCP and our experience bringing context to models, we still felt something was missing. As engineers, the focus was really on the bottom part of this diagram, solving the difficult problems of app integration, whether it's data pipelines or session management, the works. And we largely ignored the top part. How do the users experience it? How do they communicate with the data? The glaring gap that we have today is that users interact with AI using text, but text is the worst for many different reasons. For users, there are two main issues. The first is you're probably familiar with the huge walls of text that are challenging to consume and understand, especially for complex concepts or data visualizations. The second is prompting, which is exhausting because you have to type everything, even if it's just acknowledging something. And it's not trivial to do correctly because exact host capabilities aren't always known in advance, and every model requires slightly different prompting techniques. The problems also extend to applications. The applications lose control over the user experience, and they lose brand identity. In a world where brand identity and user experience are the difference between competitors in the same field, that's a huge deal. So the solution is the one that we've developed for years when you moved from CLI to applications, to graphical user interface. The problem was that it didn't exist for MCP. So we built it. We released mcp-ui, which is a client and server-side SDK that brings graphical user interface to MCP. It allows servers to replace text responses with rich and interactive UI snippets that you know and love. Seeing is believing, so we'll see a short demo. Awesome. So this is an MCP host. It supports the mcp-ui client SDK. It has two pre-configured MCP servers. One is a demo task management server, and the other one is GitMCP. So let's say that we are engineering managers, and we want to find what's the task status for the current sprint. So we'll ask the chat, and we'll get back a response based on the text that the task management server returns. And we receive this pretty bad answer from the chat. It's just a bunch of numbers. It's very hard for me to deduce anything from this. There are no actionable insights here. Luckily, the server also supports MCP-ui, so I can just say, show me. And now the server will respond with a UI component. And I have this very familiar feeling of graphs where I can actually see trends over time. I can even dive deeper without typing anything. I can go and click this day. Now I see a nice breakdown by employee. And for example, if I see that Bob is lacking, I can go and show Bob's profile. What happens here is that the host will now send out a new tool request and get back a new UI snippet for that overview that I wanted. And here really I can see the past performance, for how many tasks he has. I can see the block tasks. For example, I can see that he needs to add a route to React Router, and I can see that he needs vision mode in Playwright, etc. And let's say that Bob is a bad employee, and let's say that we're very bad managers. So we want to nudge Bob to work faster. So we click nudge here, and again, the host gets a prompt to send out another tool called to nudge Bob. Another cool thing here is that we're not just limited to the task management server talking to itself. Because of the way that these apps work, and we'll talk about it later, clicking on adding new features like asking about one of these tasks. Let's say we have vision mode in Playwright, and I want to understand what the task is, why is it being delayed. So I click Ask Chat, and as you can see, we ask the chat. And now we get a response. The cool thing is that, as you remember, we already have GitMCP configured. So not only does the model give me what it knows, it can also give me up-to-date answers based on the new documentation. Cool. So we'll go back to slides and understand what we just saw. Cool. Okay, so the cool thing here is, the flow that we had is we prompted the model with show tasks. That resulted in a tool call to our MCP server, the task management server. And instead of replying with text, the task management server replied with a UI snippet. That was very simple for the server to do because all it needed was to use the MCP-ui SDK to create an HTML resource. Once that HTML resource was ready, it came back to the host. The host took the snippet and rendered it with MCP-ui client SDK. And that UI component was rendered in a sandbox for security reasons, obviously. That was also very simple for the host to do because it could use the MCP-ui client SDK to render it just by passing over the resource and a UI action handler. That way, when we actually went and clicked on the UI component, the handler kicked in, and the host was able to take this event, this user intent, and act on it. So, for example, we were able to trigger another tool call. It can either return a new UI component or do any kind of extra action. Now, the cool thing here is that we didn't just change the interaction model from text to UI, we also changed the very development paradigm. For example, until now, if we had this task management app and you wanted to ask a question about block tasks, like we saw, the task management developer would have to write a custom connector and integration with some third-party API to fetch and display it. But with MCP-ui, the UI snippet is already embedded in a host that has its own universal connector, which is MCP. And it can perform actions on behalf of the user without the developer writing any dedicated code. And this really enables the new shift. If today we take an example of performing some kind of engineering action, we go to Jira, and we go to GitHub, we go to Calendar, and we fuse all that data ourselves. It's pretty clear that AI can do more for us. Many companies try and take that and build agents for their own apps. So we have one for GitHub and one for Jira and one for Calendar AI. But given what we've seen, we have to ask, is that the future? An agent with MCP will be able to do almost anything. Do we really need hundreds of dedicated agents or just one? So what can that future look like? There's still some time to go until we get to Jarvis, but MCP is already changing the way we interact with the world. Data and actions are centered in one place, whether it's a host like Cursor or browsers or new interaction types, and they bring the internet to us. And the takeaway here is that we need to start building the internet for them by providing context through servers like GitMCP and conveying it to users seamlessly using interaction models like MCP-ui. I invite you all to join the MCP-ui working group that Liad and I lead in the MCP spec and give your part to it. So thank you. Let's build cutting edge MCPs. Please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.